Marina folded the sheets for the last time in that house. Her fingers knew every crease in the fabric, every mark of wear, every thread that began to unravel after so many washes. 8 years folding the same sheets, sweeping the same floor, preparing the same coffee he drank without looking at her. 8 years waking up next to a man who had long slept on his back, as if her body were a territory he no longer wished to explore. The suitcase lay open on the bed they shared, or rather, on the bed where they slept side by side like two strangers who had missed the last train and had no choice but to share the same waiting bench. She placed inside 3 blouses, 2 skirts, the hairbrush her mother had given her before she died, and an old photograph from when she still believed that smiling was simple. She wouldn't take anything else, not because she couldn't, but because nothing there truly belonged to her anymore. Carlos was in the room, arms crossed, with that expression she knew all too well, the same one he wore when the team lost, when the food was cold, when she existed in a way that bothered him. But this time, there was something more. A cold, calculated determination. He had made a decision, and Marina knew that Carlos's decisions were like stones thrown into deep water. Once thrown, there was no way to retrieve them. "My mother will stay in your room," he said, without turning around. "She needs care, you understand?" Marina understood. She always understood. She understood when he arrived late without explanation. She understood when he forgot her birthday. She understood when he looked at her flat stomach with that silent contempt, as if her empty uterus were a personal offense, a betrayal she committed against him every time she menstruated. She understood when the neighbors whispered and when her mother-in-law asked for the 100th time if she had already consulted that doctor, tried that tea, that folk remedy, that saint. "Carlos," she began, and her own voice seemed strange to her, as if it came from far away, from a version of herself that still had the strength to argue. "Don't complicate things," he interrupted. "You knew this could happen. I need children, Marina. My father needs grandchildren. The farm needs heirs. You can't provide that." She wanted to say that she wasn't a machine, that love should be greater than a fertile womb, that in 8 years she had sewn every loose button off his shirts, cared for his mother-in-law when she was ill, prepared all the holiday celebrations, without ever complaining about spending the whole night on her feet while everyone else celebrated. She wanted to say that she had loved with an intensity that should count for something. But the words got stuck somewhere between her chest and throat, and all that came out was a silence as thick as honey. She closed the suitcase. Outside, the March sun scorched the asphalt of the small town of Santa Lucia. Marina walked down the main street, her suitcase brushing against her leg with every step, feeling the stairs even before she could see them. The whole town already knew. In small places like this, news travels faster than the wind, and the shame of others is the favorite entertainment of those who have nothing better to do. Donna Carmen, from the bakery, pretended not to see her. Su Antonio, from the corner store, lowered his eyes when she passed by. The women in the square interrupted their conversation for a second. Just a second, enough for her to know they were talking about her. Marina kept her head held high, not out of pride, but because if she lowered it, the tears would fall, and she had promised herself that she wouldn't cry where she could be seen. She had nowhere to go. Her parents were dead. Her only sister lived too far away and had enough problems without needing to take in a divorced woman with no money. Marina walked to the bus stop at the edge of town and sat on the worn wooden bench, next to an old woman sleeping with her mouth open and a young man frantically typing on his cell phone, oblivious to his surroundings. The bus to the capital was leaving in 2 hours. She had enough money for the fare and perhaps a week's stay in some cheap boarding house. After that, she didn't know, but she would find out. She always did. That's what people like her did. They kept going, even when the road ahead was nothing but darkness. That's when the car stopped. A black car, too big for the narrow streets of Santa Lucia. The kind of car people looked at twice, not because they recognized the make, but because they knew it represented a world they didn't belong to. The driver got out first, a man in a suit who seemed uncomfortable in the heat, and opened the back door. And then he left. Marina recognized him immediately, even though they had never really spoken. Everyone in Santa Lucia knew Rafael Medeiros, even if only from afar. He was the son of old Medeiros, the man who once owned half the land in the region before losing almost everything in bad business deals and even worse gambles. But Rafael had rebuilt the family name. He had gone to the big city, made a fortune in something involving technology, no one knew exactly what, and now he returned from time to visit what remained of the family property, always with that air of someone who no longer belonged there but also couldn't abandon it completely. He was tall, with dark hair that was beginning to gray at the temples and grayish-green eyes that seemed to hold too many secrets. He wore simple clothes, but the kind of simplicity that comes at a high price. A perfectly tailored white shirt, dark trousers, leather shoes that had never stepped in mud. And he carried in his arms a little girl of perhaps 4 years old, with golden curls and eyes identical to his, who slept with her face resting on his shoulder. Raphael stopped in front of the bakery, seemed to be thinking about something, and then his gaze met Marina's. She reflexively looked away. She didn't want to be seen like this, sitting on a bus stop bench with an old suitcase at her feet and her whole life crumbling around her. But when she looked again, he was still watching her, with an expression she couldn't decipher. It wasn't exactly pity, nor morbid curiosity like the others. It was something closer to recognition, as if he saw something in her that the others didn't. The little girl stirred in his arms, murmuring softly, and he looked away. He went into the bakery, and Marina gazed back at the empty horizon, where the asphalt trembled in the heat, as if the very ground were uncertain of its shape. Half an hour later, he showed up again. "Excuse me," he said, and his voice was softer than she had expected. "You're Marina, aren't you? Carlos's wife." "Ex-wife," she corrected. The words came out more acidic than she intended. Or almost. "I think she still has papers to sign." He nodded, as if confirming something he already suspected. The girl was now awake, her arms around her father's neck, watching Marina with that absolute curiosity that only children possess. "Daddy, she's sad," the girl said, in a whisper too loud to be discreet. "Livia?" he gently reprimanded. "But she is, I can see." Marina felt a tightening in her chest. The children always knew. There was no fooling them with fabricated smiles and averted glances. They sensed the truth, like animals sense approaching storms. "Where are you waiting for the bus to?" Raphael asked. "For the capital." "Is someone waiting for you there?" Marina hesitated. The honest answer was no. The answer that would preserve her dignity would be anything but the truth. But she was too tired to lie, and something about the way he asked, without judgment, without that gleam of satisfaction some people have when they witness someone else's misfortune, made her simply shake her head. "No." He was silent for a moment. Livia was fiddling with a button on his shirt, distracted. "I need someone," he said finally, "to take care of Livia. Nanny, I think that's the word. Or a housekeeper. I don't know. Someone who stays at the house, who takes care of her when I need to work, who is present. The last person I hired lasted 2 months before quitting. Said the house was too isolated, that Livia was too quiet, that she couldn't adapt." Marina looked at the girl, who was now staring back at her with disconcerting intensity. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm offering you the job." She almost laughed. Almost. The absurdity of the situation was too great to process. A rich man she barely knew appearing out of nowhere, offering exactly what she needed at the precise moment when she had nothing left. It seemed like a trap, or a dream, or a bad joke the universe was playing on her. "You don't know me," she said. "I know your reputation. You took care of Carlos's mother-in-law for 2 years when she was bedridden. You took care of the house, the farm, everything, and you never complained. People talk. People say a lot of things. Yes, but some of the things they say are true." Livia slipped from her father's arms and approached Marina. She stopped very close, studying her face as if it were a map she needed to memorize. Then, without asking permission, she took Marina's hand between her own, small and warm and absolutely trusting. "You have good hands," the girl said. "My mother had good hands, but she's gone." The air rushed out of Marina's lungs as if someone had punched her in the stomach. She looked at Raphael, searching for an explanation, and saw something pass across his face, a fleeting shadow of pain that he tried to hide too quickly. "Her mother left us," he said simply. 2 years ago, she didn't die. She just left. She decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore, or a wife. She took her things and disappeared. Livia was 2 years old. Marina looked at the little girl who was still holding her hand and felt her heart break in a way she hadn't expected. An abandoned child, a father trying to do the impossible, and she, who couldn't have children, being offered the chance to care for a child who desperately needed someone to stay with her. "Why me?" she asked again. "There are agencies, professionals, qualified people." "Livia doesn't like qualified people," Raphael said, and there was an old weariness in his voice. "She doesn't like almost anyone, but she's holding your hand now. That doesn't usually happen." It was true. The girl hadn't let go. Her small fingers squeezed Marina's, as if they had found something they had been searching for a long time. "Come with me," he said. "At least see the house, see the situation. If you don't like it, I'll take you to the bus station myself and pay for your ticket to wherever you want to go. No commitment, no pressure." Marina looked at the suitcase at her feet, at the empty bus stop, at the city that had expelled her without a word, and then she looked at the green-eyed girl who, unknowingly, had done the first kind thing anyone had done for her in months: treat her as if she had value. "Okay," she said. "I'll see." The Medeiros property was 40 minutes from Santa Lucia, atop a hill surrounded by ancient trees. Marina remembered passing by there once, years ago, when the road was still dirt and the gates were rusted with neglect. Now the road was paved, the gates were new, and the house that stood before her was both imposing and strangely melancholic. It was too big for 2 people. An old mansion that had been carefully restored, preserving the tall windows and wooden balconies that told stories of other eras. But despite all the beauty, there was something empty there, something Marina felt as soon as she crossed the threshold, a silence that went beyond the absence of noise. It was the silence of a house that wasn't truly lived in, of rooms that existed without purpose, of a family that had broken apart, leaving only fragments trying to pretend they still formed a whole. "It's big," she said, because she needed to say something. "Too big," Raphael agreed. "It belonged to my grandmother. She died when I was 15. My father never wanted to sell it. I couldn't either, so I renovated it. I thought it would be good to raise Livia here, away from the city, with space to run around. But sometimes I think it was a mistake. A house needs more people to make sense." Livia had already run inside, disappearing down some corridor with the familiarity of someone who knew every corner of that place. Marina watched her go, thinking about how children adapted to anything, houses that were too big, absent fathers, mothers who disappeared. They simply kept going, filling the voids with imagination and hope, until one day they grew up and realized that some voids could not be filled. Raphael showed her the house in silence, the large kitchen with appliances that looked like they had never been used, the library full of books that smelled of time, the empty bedrooms upstairs, each decorated with a care that didn't match the abandonment. And finally, Livia's room, an explosion of color amidst so much sobriety. Walls painted a soft yellow, toys scattered on the floor, drawings pasted on the wall next to the bed. "She draws a lot," Raphael explained. "She spends hours drawing. She doesn't talk much, but she draws everything she feels." Marina approached the drawings. There were houses with pointed roofs, trees with enormous canopies, a tall man with dark hair who could only be Raphael, and in almost all of them, a female figure with long hair who always appeared with her back turned, always walking away, always with a void where her face should be. The mother. Her eyes burned, but she blinked quickly. It wasn't the time to cry. It wasn't about her. "How much would you pay?" she asked, trying to bring the conversation back to the practical, to the concrete, to something that could be measured and calculated. Raphael mentioned an amount that made her swallow hard. It was more than Carlos earned in 3 months on the farm, more than she had ever had in her personal account. "It's a lot," she said. "That's what the job is worth. You'd live here, you'd have your own room, your own expenses covered, Sundays off if you want. And Livia needs someone who will stay, Marina, someone who won't leave when things get tough. You seem like the kind of person who stays." She almost laughed again. What irony. Her husband had kicked her out for not being able to give her children, and now a stranger wanted her precisely for her ability to stay, to endure, to remain when everyone else left. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Sure, but don't take too long. I need to get back to the city in 3 days. If you don't accept, I'll have to find someone else." That night, Marina slept in one of the guest rooms. The bed was too soft. She was used to hard mattresses and thin pillows. The silence was too profound. At Carlos's house, there was always the noise of the dogs, the roosters, the wind banging against the poorly sealed windows. There, the only sound was that of her own thoughts spinning in circles that led nowhere. She thought of Carlos, sleeping at that moment in the bed they had shared for 8 years, probably relieved to finally be free of her. She thought of her mother-in-law, who had never truly liked her, but whom she had cared for nonetheless, changing adult diapers and administering medication and listening to endless complaints without ever losing her patience. She thought of the babies that never came, the failed attempts, the doctors who shook their heads with feigned sorrow, the bitter teas she drank out of desperation, the prayers she said to saints she wasn't sure she believed in. And he thought of Livia, in the way the girl had held her hand without asking, in the way she had said, with that brutal honesty of children, that Marina had good hands, in the way her drawings told stories of abandonment that she had no words to express. At 3 a.m, Marina heard a noise in the hallway, small, hesitant footsteps. She got up and slowly opened the door, finding Livia standing there, hugging a battered plush rabbit, her eyes wide with fear. "Nightmare?" Marina asked softly. The girl nodded. "Do you want to come in?" Another nod. Marina stepped aside to let her pass. Livia climbed onto the bed with the agility of someone accustomed to moving silently and snuggled against the pillows, still hugging the rabbit. "My mother never let me go into her room when I had nightmares," Livia said, so quietly that Marina almost didn't hear. "She said I had to learn to sleep alone. And your father? Dad will let me, but he's far away. In the room at the end, and the hallway is very dark." Marina sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance without intruding on the child's space more than she had been invited to. What was the nightmare about? Livia was silent for a moment, pressing the rabbit against her chest. "There was a door," she said finally, "and someone would walk through it and leave, and I would run, but the door kept getting further away, and I could never reach it." Marina felt something break inside her. A piece she didn't even know was still whole. "I'm not leaving," she heard her own voice say. "If I stay here, Livia, I won't leave." The girl looked at her with those green eyes that seemed too old for such a small face. "Promise?" "I promise." And at that moment, sitting on a bed that wasn't hers, in a house she didn't recognize, making a promise to a child she had just met, Marina made her decision. Not because the salary was good, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because, for the first time in years, someone truly needed her, not for what she could produce or offer, but simply for who she was. The first few months were difficult in ways Marina hadn't anticipated. Raphael traveled frequently, meetings in São Paulo, negotiations abroad, commitments he never fully explained and that she never asked about. When he was home, he was attentive to Livia, but there was a distance in his eyes, as if part of him was always somewhere else, solving problems that no one else could see. Livia was exactly as he had described. Too quiet for a child her age, too serious, too observant. She didn't play like other children. She didn't run through the hallways shouting. She didn't make a mess on purpose. She didn't test limits. It was as if she had learned, too early, that drawing attention could mean being left behind. Marina started with small things. She would prepare breakfast before Livia woke up, always including something sweet because she had noticed that the girl liked honey. She would sit with her while she drew, not commenting, not interfering, just being present. She would read stories before bed, even when Livia didn't ask, even when she seemed not to be listening. In the 3rd week, Livia asked Marina to comb her hair. In the 5th week, Livia fell asleep with her head in Marina's lap while they watched a movie. In the 2nd month, Livia called Marina by her name for the first time, not young lady or ma'am, but Marina, just like that, as if the word had always existed in her vocabulary. Raphael noticed the changes. Marina saw it when he watched the two of them interacting, with that expression she still couldn't fully decipher. Sometimes it looked like gratitude, sometimes it looked like something more complicated, as if seeing her daughter open up to another person brought relief and pain in equal measure. "You're good with her," he said one night, when Livia was already asleep and they were having coffee on the veranda overlooking the garden. "She's an easy child to love," Marina replied. "No, she isn't. She's a difficult child to reach. Most people give up before they succeed. You didn't give up." Marina gazed at the dark garden, where the trees formed silhouettes against the starry sky. "I know what it's like to be left behind," she said without planning. The words simply came out. "I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough, that something about you is fundamentally wrong, incomplete. I don't want her to feel that. No child should feel that." The silence that followed was long, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people recognize something in each other, even without having words to name it. "Beatrice left me because I worked too much," Raphael finally said. At least that's what she said, that I was always absent, always distant, that she felt alone even when I was in the same room. She was right about some things, but the truth is, she never really wanted it. The house, the family, the responsibility. She wanted the idea. When the idea became reality, she realized it wasn't for her. And Livia? Livia was an accident. Beatrice was careful not to get pregnant. When it happened, she considered not having a child. I begged. I said I would take care of everything, that she wouldn't need to change anything if she didn't want to. Then Livia was born, and for a while it seemed like Beatrice was going to adapt. But then came the colic, and the sleepless nights, and the responsibilities that couldn't be delegated, and one day I came home and Beatrice was gone. Did she leave a note? An email. She said she needed to meet, that it wasn't fair to me or Livia for her to stay when she couldn't be the mother we needed, that it was better this way. Marina thought about all the things she could say, that it was selfishness, that it was cowardice, that no justification would be enough to abandon a 2-year-old child. But she also thought about how people break in different ways, how some wounds are too invisible to be judged from the outside, how she herself had spent years with a man who never truly loved her without having the courage to leave. "Are you angry with her?" Marina asked. "I was. For a long time I was. Now I'm mostly afraid. Afraid that Livia will grow up thinking there's something wrong with her, that it was her fault her mother left. I try to say it wasn't, but how do you explain to a child that some people simply can't stay, even when they should?" Marina had no answer. Some questions existed only to be carried around, not resolved. "She'll be okay," she said, because it was the only consolation possible. "Livia is strong, stronger than you can imagine, and she has you." "She has you now too," Raphael said. And there was something in the way he said it, a weight, an intention, that made Marina really look at him for the first time that night. The light from the balcony cast shadows on his face, softening the lines of tiredness around his eyes. He was handsome, she realized. Not in the obvious way, not the way that made people stop in the street. It was a beauty that revealed itself little by little, in the way he tilted his head when he listened, in the gentleness of his hands when he held Livia in his arms, in the vulnerability that sometimes escaped behind the facade of a successful man who controlled everything. Marina pushed the thought away. She was an employee. He was the boss. There were lines that shouldn't be crossed, distances that should be maintained. And besides, she had barely emerged from a failed marriage. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for an emotionally unavailable man who still carried the wounds of his own abandonment. "It's late," she said, getting up. "Good night, Raphael." "Good evening, Marina." She walked back inside the house, feeling his eyes follow her until the door closed. And she pretended not to notice how her heart was beating a little faster than it should. Spring arrived, bringing with it a lightness the house hadn't known in a long time. Marina planted flowers in the garden, daisies, sunflowers, roses of every color, and Livia helped her, her small hands sinking into the soil, discovering the simple joy of seeing something grow because of her care. They established routines: breakfast at 7 with pancakes on Saturdays, drawing after lunch when the sun streamed through the library windows, bedtime stories, sometimes 2 or 3 when Livia insisted, and conversations, so many conversations, about small and big things, important and silly things, real and imagined things. Livia started talking more, not just with Marina, but with the gardener who came twice a week, with the woman who did the heavy cleaning, even with Raphael, who seemed simultaneously delighted and frightened by his daughter's transformation. "She told a joke yesterday," he said to Marina, with an expression of pure astonishment. "A real joke, with a beginning, middle, and end. I didn't even know she knew jokes." "She knows a lot of things," Marina replied. "She just needed someone to stop and listen." It wasn't an accusation, at least not intentionally, but she saw something cross Raphael's face, guilt, perhaps, or regret, and she quickly softened her tone. "You work very hard. You do what you can. Not everyone can be present and provide at the same time." "My father could do it," he said bitterly. "Or at least that's what I thought as a child. He was always there, at every football game, every school performance, every stormy night when I was scared. Later, I found out it was because he had given up everything else, the company, the ambitions, the dreams. He gave up everything to be present, and in the end, he had nothing to leave us but debts and a house falling apart. And you decided to do things differently. I decided it would be different, that I would build something solid, something that would last. And I did. But the price..." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Marina understood. She understood the pain of impossible choices, of paths that forked and demanded you give up something to move forward. She understood the guilt of realizing too late that perhaps you had chosen wrong. "It's never too late to change," she said. "Livia is only 4 years old. You still have plenty of time." "Time," he repeated, as if the word were foreign. "Sometimes I forget that time exists. That it's not just a race to the next goal, the next contract, the next success. You remind me of that. You and Livia." There was something in his eyes when he said that, something that made Marina hold her breath for a moment. "I'm going to cut back on travel," he continued. "I've already taken some steps. Starting next month, I'll be working more from home. Video meetings whenever possible. Travel only when absolutely necessary." "That's good. For Livia." "For Livia," he agreed. "And for me. And maybe..." He paused, seeming to reconsider what he was going to say. "Maybe for us. All of us who live in this house." That night, Marina couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling of her room, thinking about all the ways life could change in an instant. A car stopping at a bus stop, a child holding her hand, a man looking at her as if she were more than just his daughter's nanny. She remembered Carlos, how he never really looked at her, not even at the beginning when they were supposedly in love, how she felt invisible next to him, like a piece of furniture that served a function but had no intrinsic value. And she thought about how different it was when Raphael looked at her, as if he truly saw her. Not just her face or her body or her usefulness, but her, Marina, the person, with all her complexities and imperfections. It was dangerous to think like that. Far too dangerous. But danger had never stopped anyone from feeling. Autumn arrived, painting the trees gold and red, and with it came the first complications. Carlos showed up at the property on a Sunday morning when Marina least expected it. She was in the garden with Livia, the two of them picking the last flowers before the cold took them away, when she heard the sound of the car driving up the road. She recognized the vehicle even before seeing the driver's face, an old faded blue pickup truck that she had washed hundreds of times during their years of marriage. "Stay here," she told Livia, trying to keep her voice calm. "I'm just gonna see who it is." Carlos got out of the car with that arrogance she knew so well. He looked around, assessing the property with a mixture of envy and contempt. "So, this is where you are," he said instead of greeting her. "I heard the rumors, but I didn't believe them. Marina, the saint, the sufferer, living in the rich man's house. How long did it take you to spread your legs for him?" The insult hit her like a slap, but she didn't back down. "Not anymore." The months in that house, taking care of Livia, being treated with respect by Raphael, had changed something in her. They had reminded her that she had value, even if Carlos had never been able to see it. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "The divorce papers. You didn't pick them up. My lawyer says he needs your signature." "Then bring me the papers by mail. You didn't need to come all the way here." "Yes, I needed to." He approached, lowering his voice. "I needed to see it with my own eyes. The woman I fed for 8 years, who couldn't give me a single child, living like a queen in another man's house, taking care of his son, since she couldn't have any of her own." Marina felt each word like a knife, but kept her face impassive. She had learned from Carlos not to show when it hurt. To show it was to give him power. "You kicked me out," she said, each word measured and precise. "You put me out on the street with no money, nowhere to go, nothing but the clothes I managed to cram into a suitcase. You have no right to judge what I did afterward." "I have every right. I'm still her husband. On paper, only on paper. And soon, not even that." Carlos took another step, and for a moment Marina thought he was going to touch her. She prepared to step back, to scream if necessary, but then she heard another voice coming from behind her. "Is everything all right here?" Raphael. Marina hadn't heard him approach, but there he was, standing a few meters away, with a posture that was both relaxed and clearly ready to intervene if necessary. Carlos sized him up, and Marina saw the exact moment he realized he didn't have the upper hand. At the farm, surrounded by friends and family, Carlos was intimidating. Here, in unfamiliar territory, facing a man who clearly had more resources and more power, he was just a bully discovering his bluff didn't work. "No problem," Carlos said, taking a step back. "I just came to sort some things out with my wife." "Ex-wife," Raphael corrected, and there was steel in his voice. "And whatever you have to settle, you can do it through legal means. Lawyers, notaries, the post office. This is private property. You're not welcome here." For a moment, Carlos seemed to consider arguing, but then he looked at Raphael again, assessing, calculating, and apparently decided it wasn't worth it. "You'll regret this," he told Marina, already walking back to the car. "When he gets tired of you too, when he finds out what you're really like, you'll regret having traded me in." "I didn't replace you," Marina said, and for the first time her voice trembled. "You threw me away. There's a difference." Carlos slammed the car door shut and drove off, kicking up dust on the dirt road. Marina stood there, watching the pickup truck disappear around the bend, her whole body trembling with adrenaline and emotions she didn't know how to process. "Marina?" She turned around. Livia was where she had left her, holding a handful of wilted flowers, her eyes wide open. "He yelled at you," the girl said. "The ugly man yelled at you." Marina crouched down until she was at Livia's height. "He's gone now. He's not coming back." "Promise?" "I promise." She hugged the girl, perhaps squeezing too tightly, needing the physical contact to anchor herself in reality. And she felt, more than saw, Raphael approach and stop beside them, a solid and comforting presence. "Let's go inside," he said softly. "I'll make hot chocolate." Marina nodded, distrusting her own voice. And when she stood up, her eyes met Raphael's, and she saw something there that took her breath away. It wasn't pity. It wasn't curiosity. It was anger. A cold, controlled anger directed at her, as if Carlos's insult had been an insult to him as well. No one had ever been angry at her before. That night, after Livia fell asleep, Raphael knocked on Marina's bedroom door. She opened it, still dressed, sitting on the bed with a book she wasn't actually reading. "May I come in?" She hesitated. They had kept their distance so carefully for the past few months. Meetings in the kitchen, conversations on the balcony, stolen moments always with Livia nearby. Never like this, the two of them alone, with the dark night outside and a tension in the air that neither of them could ignore. "Yes," she said finally, stepping aside to let him pass. He went inside and closed the door, but stayed close to it, not going any further than necessary. "I want you to know," he began, "that what he said, none of it is true. You're not here for self-interest or convenience or any reason he imagined. You're here because Livia needs you, because this house needs you." He paused. "Because I need you." Marina felt the air escape her lungs. "Raphael, I know it's complicated. I know there's a working relationship, a line that shouldn't be crossed. I know you just got out of a marriage, that the last thing you need is more complications in your life, but I can't pretend anymore that I don't feel what I feel. I look at you every day, I see how you take care of my daughter, how you've transformed this house into a real home, and I think about what it would be like if this were real. If you weren't just the nanny, if you were..." "Stop," she said, and her own voice sounded strange to her, hoarse with emotion. "Stop, please." He stopped. He stood there, vulnerable in a way she had never seen him before, waiting. "I can't," she said, and each word was a stab in herself. "Do you understand? I can't be just another woman who passes through your life. stays for a while, and then leaves, Livia couldn't bear it, and neither could I. I'm not asking you to leave, I'm asking you to stay. Really. Not as an employee, not as a favor, and not as a convenient arrangement, as part of this. Part of us. You don't know me. Not really. I know enough. I know the way you hold Livia's hand when she's scared. I know the sound of your laughter when you two are playing in the garden. I know the kindness with which you treat everyone who enters this house, from the gardener to the cleaning lady. I know the strength you needed to get up after your marriage fell apart, to accept my offer, to make a promise to a child you had just met, and to keep that promise every day since then. Marina felt the tears welling up before she realized she was crying. She had held on for so long. She had been strong for so long. And now, with his words shattering all her defenses, she simply couldn't anymore. I can't have children, she said, because she needed him to know. She needed him to understand what she was choosing. The doctor said it's almost impossible. That's why. I know, Raphael said softly. And I don't care. I already have a daughter who loves you more than I ever thought it was possible for her to love anyone. A daughter who, if you leave, will be devastated in a way I don't know how to fix. And you? How do you feel? He took a step closer, just one. Enough for her to feel his warmth, the scent of soap, and something else that was simply him. I feel like I've found you, he said. After so long thinking I'd never find anyone, after Beatrice, after all the cynicism and all the pain I had given up believing that there was anyone who could make me feel this way. And then you appeared, sitting at that bus stop with an old suitcase and all the dignity in the world, and Livia held your hand, and something changed. Something I can no longer undo, even if I wanted to. Marina looked at him through her tears, at the man she had known as a stranger and now knew better than she had ever known anyone. At the devoted father, the exhausted businessman, the boy who had once dreamed of being different from his own father and who was still learning what that truly meant. I'm afraid, she confessed, of believing, of opening up, of letting you in and then finding out it was a mistake. I'm afraid too, every day. Afraid of not being enough, of failing again, of ruining the only good thing that's happened to me in years. But fear doesn't go away just because we ignore it. The only way to win is to keep going anyway. He extended his hand, a simple gesture, an offering. Marina looked at that outstretched hand and thought of all the times Carlos had ignored her, rejected her, belittled her. She thought of all the years she had spent feeling unworthy, incomplete, wrong in some fundamental way. And she thought about what it would be like to start over, to build something new on the ashes of what had been destroyed. She took his hand. The touch was electric, gentle and intense at the same time, laden with everything they hadn't said and everything they would still say. He pulled her gently, slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. She didn't pull back. When his lips met hers, Marina felt something fall into place, something she hadn't even known was out of place. It wasn't a fireworks explosion, like in the movies. It was something deeper, more real. A feeling of finally being exactly where she was meant to be. They didn't go beyond a kiss that night. They didn't need to. There was time. For the first time in her life, Marina felt that there was time for all the things that mattered. The news that the rich man's nanny was dating her boss reached Santa Lucia in less than a week. In small places, rumors traveled faster than light, especially when they involved scandal, social class, and people the community loved to judge. Marina faced stares the first time she returned to the city to finally sign the divorce papers. Heads turned as she passed by. Whispers multiplied. Donna Carmen, from the bakery, made a point of asking her customers aloud if anyone knew how much the new Mrs. Medeiros was charging for her services. She held her head high. Not out of pride this time, but because she finally understood that the opinion of people who had never helped her carried any weight. Carlos was in the notary's office when she arrived, looking like he'd swallowed something sour. He signed the papers without looking at her. When she handed the pen back, he ignored it, leaving it on the table as if her touch were contaminated. You'll pay for this, he murmured low enough for only her to hear. When he gets tired of you, when he realizes you're not worth the effort, you'll come crawling back here. And I'll laugh. Marina put the pen back in her bag, since he didn't want it back. Goodbye, Carlos, she said. I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for, even if you don't know what it is. She left the registry office without looking back, and she felt for the first time in 8 years that she was truly free. Winter had arrived, bringing a bone-chilling chill, but the house on the hill had never felt so warm. Marina and Raphael hadn't moved into the same room. She'd insisted on maintaining a certain formality until things settled down, until Livia adjusted, until they were sure. But they slept with their doors open, voices echoing down the hallway when one of them couldn't sleep, comfort within easy walking distance. Livia blossomed. It was the only word that fit. She, who had been a withdrawn and quiet girl, now ran around the house, humming invented songs. She drew complete families, no longer figures with their backs turned walking away, but people facing forward, smiling, holding hands. And she had begun to call Marina by a different name, not simply Marina, not aunt, not ma'am, not any of the polite titles that children used for adults who weren't relatives. She called Marina, "My Marina. My Marina, can I have another cookie? My Marina, tell the story of the rabbit again? Dad, my Marina is going to bake a cake today. Will you stay home to eat it?" Raphael noticed it before Marina did. He was the one who gently pointed out the meaning of that small change in language. "She's claiming you," he said, "the way children do, marking territory, making it clear to the world that you belong to her." Marina thought about Carlos's words, that she couldn't have children of her own, that her worth lay in something her body couldn't produce. And she thought about Livia, a child who hadn't come from her womb but who was doing everything she could to enter her heart permanently. Perhaps, she thought, there were many ways to be a mother. The following spring brought more concrete changes. Raphael reorganized his company to work almost entirely from home. He hired a manager to oversee the São Paulo office, appearing in person only when absolutely necessary. Trips that previously lasted weeks became rare, and when they did happen, he took Livia and Marina along. "I want to show you both the world," he explained, "but I also want to be present while I'm showing you. There's no point in traveling if I'm going to spend all my time in meetings." They went to white sand beaches, where Livia discovered she loved the sea, to ancient cities where they walked along cobblestone streets and ate ice cream in sunny squares, to snow-covered mountains where Livia made her first snowman, crooked, small, absolutely perfect. Marina documented everything in photographs, which she then printed and placed in albums. The house began to fill with visible memories, frames on the walls, magnets on the refrigerator, Livia's drawings framed as if they were valuable works of art, because they were. One day, while organizing one of her albums, Marina found an old photo she didn't recognize. A beautiful woman, with blonde hair and light eyes, holding a newborn baby with an expression that wasn't exactly love. It was closer to bewilderment, fear perhaps. "It's Beatrice," Raphael said when she asked. "I kept it for Livia's sake, for when she's old enough to ask." Marina stared at the photo for a long moment. "She is beautiful." "She is. She was. Beauty was never the problem." "Did you love her?" Raphael thought before answering. It was one of the things Marina appreciated most about him, the way he considered the questions, how he didn't just throw out automatic answers to fill the silence. "I loved the idea I had of her. The brilliant, independent woman who made everything seem easy." It took me a while to realize that making it seem easy wasn't the same as being easy. That behind that ease was a person who couldn't get attached to anything or anyone, not even to me, not even to her own daughter. "Do you think she regrets it?" "I don't know. She never contacted me again, not once. Sometimes I imagine she's out there somewhere, living the life she wanted to live, being the person she wanted to be. And I hope she's at peace. Not for her sake, but because holding on to resentment is exhausting and I already have too many things to deal with." Marina put the photo back in the box, among other relics from a past that belonged to a different family. "Do you think Livia will want to meet her someday? Beatrice, I mean?" "Probably. Children want answers. They'll want to understand why they were left behind, why they weren't enough. It's their right to seek them out if they want to. What if she looks for it and doesn't like what she finds? Then she'll have you to help her process it. And me, and all the love we can give." He paused. "That's what families do, isn't it? They don't protect each other from pain. They just make sure no one has to face the pain alone." Marina had never thought of family in those terms. In her experience, family was obligation, pressure, expectation. It was Carlos asking when she was going to get pregnant. It was her mother-in-law looking at her with barely disguised disappointment. It was feeling inadequate at every gathering, every holiday, every silent night, when the failure of her body seemed to fill every empty space in the house. But there, in that new house, with that new configuration of people who were choosing to be together, family meant something else. It meant Raphael waking up early to make pancakes because Marina was tired. It meant Livia drawing 3 figures holding hands and writing "we" underneath in crooked letters. It meant conversations on the porch when none of them could sleep, and comfortable silences when words weren't needed. Summer brought a decision Marina hadn't expected. Raphael called her for a serious conversation in his office. The only room in the house she still avoided, feeling it wasn't her territory. "I want to change the situation," he said bluntly. "The labor issue. You're technically still my employee. There's a contract, a salary, all the formalities, and I want to put an end to that." Marina felt her stomach sink. "Do you want me to leave?" "No." He seemed genuinely surprised by her conclusion. "No, Marina. I want you to stop being my employee. To live here not because you get paid for it, but because it's your home as much as it's mine. To take care of Livia not because it's your job, but because you love each other. But What if something goes wrong? What if it doesn't work? If it doesn't work out, we'll figure it out. But I don't want you living here with an always open exit door anymore. I want commitment. Real commitment. And for that, you need to be here because you choose to be, not because you depend on me financially. It was a proposal that both frightened and attracted her in equal measure. Financial security had been her anchor for the past few months, knowing that, regardless of what happened between them, she had a job, a salary, a place to live. Giving that up meant trusting completely in something that was still relatively new. And how would it work, she asked, but practically? I would transfer you an amount of money, enough for you to support yourself if you want. Pay rent elsewhere, start a business, anything. You would have real financial independence, not dependence disguised as a salary. You don't have to do that. I know I don't need to. I want to do it. Marina thought of Carlos, who, in 8 years of marriage, had never put a penny into her account, who had left her with nothing when he kicked her out, who probably still thought this was normal, that wives didn't need their own money, that dependence was synonymous with loyalty. Raphael was offering the opposite. He was offering freedom. The freedom to stay by choice, not by necessity. Do you understand what you're giving me? She said softly. I understand. That's why I'm giving it. She accepted. Not the money itself. Part of her still resisted accepting sums that seemed too large, too generous. But the offer. The contract was terminated. Marina ceased to be an employee and became... what? Girlfriend seemed too childish. Companion, perhaps. Partner. Or simply Marina, who lived there because that was where she belonged. Livia received the news of the change with a practical shrug that only children can manage. But you already live here, she said. What's going to change? Nothing's going to change, love. We're just making things more official. Is it official when someone signs the paper? And. So when are you two going to get married? Marina gasped for air. Raphael, who was on the other side of the room, seemed equally taken aback. Getting married is... it's different, Livia. Why? You kiss, you live together, you take care of me. Lucas from my school said that's what married couples do. The logic was irrefutable in its childlike simplicity. Marina looked at Raphael, seeking help, and found only a crooked smile that suggested he didn't have a ready answer either. It's complicated, Marina finally said. Adults always say things are complicated when they don't know how to explain them, Livia observed with that disconcerting honesty that children unknowingly used as a weapon. The question remained unanswered, but planted like a seed that they both knew would eventually sprout. The autumn of that year brought an unexpected visitor. Marina was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard the car arrive. It wasn't Raphael. He was in his office on a video conference that promised to last a long time. Livia was playing in her room, inventing stories for her dolls. She went to the window and saw a taxi pulling up to the entrance. A woman got out, blonde, elegant, wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. Marina felt something cold run down her spine before she even recognized the face. Beatrice. The woman walked to the door as if the house were still hers. Marina dried her hands on her apron and went to open it, her heart beating so hard she was sure it was audible. You must be the new one, Beatrice said, taking off her glasses. Her eyes were a pale blue, cold as ice. The nanny who became the girlfriend? Or is it the other way around? What do you want? I came to see my daughter. 3 words. 3 words that held the power to destroy everything Marina had built. Everything Livia had become. Everything they had worked so hard to protect. Livia doesn't know you, Marina said, keeping her voice steady through sheer willpower. You left when she was 2 years old. She has no memory of you. She's going to find out now. That's not how it works. No, I'm her biological mother. What are you? A replacement? The woman my husband brought home to fill the void I left? Ex-husband, and you left that void by choice. Nobody kicked you out. Beatrice smiled, a thin, calculated smile that didn't reach her eyes. You think you understand the situation? That it's all black and white. Bad mother left, good father stayed. Lovely substitute appeared to save the day. But real life is more complicated than that, darling. I had my reasons for leaving. Reasons you don't know and that I'm not going to explain to a stranger on my own doorstep. This is no longer your home. Beatrice's smile faltered for a moment. Just a moment, but enough for Marina to realize that the coldness was a facade. There was something behind it. Pain, perhaps, or regret, or simply despair disguised as arrogance. I want to see my daughter, Beatrice repeated, and this time there was an urgency in her voice that hadn't been there before. Just see her. I'm not going to take her away. I'm not going to make a scene. I'm not going to traumatize her. I just need to see her. Marina hesitated. Every instinct told her to close the door, to protect Livia from the woman who had abandoned her, to keep the world safe, small, and controllable. But she also thought of herself, at 5 years old, asking her father where her mother was and receiving only silence. She thought of all the unanswered questions she carried to this day. She thought of Livia, who one day would be an adult and would want to understand. "Wait here," she said. "I'll call Raphael." Raphael received the news with a calmness that Marina knew was only superficial. She knew him well enough now to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched, the effort he made to keep anger from taking over. They spoke in hushed voices in the office, while Beatrice waited in the living room, looking around as if trying to make up a story about what she had lost. "What do you want to do?" Marina asked. "What I want to do is send her away. Ask her where she's been for the last 2 years. Why she hasn't sent a single message, why she thought she could just show up like this. But you're not going to do that?" "No, because it's not about me. It's about Livia. And Livia, one day, will want to know who her biological mother is. If I deny her that chance now, I'll be the one she resents later." "Do you want me to call her?" "No, I'll call. You stay. Like support. For her and for me." Livia came down the stairs holding her father's hand, her curious eyes fixed on the strange woman sitting on the sofa. She didn't seem frightened. Children were rarely afraid of things they didn't understand, but there was a caution in her movements that Marina recognized. The same caution she herself had developed in years of marriage to Carlos, the ability to sense danger before it manifested itself. "Livia," Raphael said, This is Beatrice." "Hi," Livia said, polite but reserved. Beatrice seemed genuinely surprised by her daughter's size, as if she hadn't realized that 2 years meant twice the length of life she knew. "You've grown so much," she said, and there was something broken in her voice. "You were so small when—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Livia tilted her head, studying Beatrice with that intensity that Marina knew so well. "You're the woman from the drawings," she finally said, "the one who always has her back turned." The silence that followed was dense enough to cut with a knife. Beatrice looked at Raphael, then at Marina, then back at Livia, trying to process what her daughter had just said. "I used to draw you," Livia continued, seemingly oblivious to the weight of her words, "but I didn't know what your face looked like, so you'd turn your back and walk away." "Livia," Raphael began, but she ignored him. "My Marina doesn't turn her back. She faces forward, with her eyes and mouth and nose and everything." "Your Marina?" Beatrice repeated, and there was something dangerous in her tone. "Yes, mine. She takes care of me, makes pancakes, reads stories, doesn't leave." Beatrice stood up abruptly, and for a moment Marina thought she was going to make a scene. Scream, perhaps, or cry. But she just stood there, motionless with her arms stiff at her sides and an expression that was impossible to decipher. "I shouldn't have come," she said, more to herself than to any of them. "It was a mistake." "Beatrice," Raphael said, stepping forward. "Wait, we can talk. Establish some kind of—" "No." She was already walking toward the door. "She's okay. She's better than I could have given her. That's what I needed to know." She stopped at the door, looking back one last time. Her eyes met Marina's, and something passed between them, a mutual recognition perhaps. Two women who loved the same child in completely different ways. "Take good care of her," Beatrice said, and then she left. The car disappeared down the road, and the house fell silent. Livia was still holding her father's hand, looking at the closed door with a thoughtful expression. "She was pretty," the girl finally said, "but she had sad eyes." "Why did she have sad eyes, Daddy?" Raphael crouched down until he was at his daughter's height. "Sometimes people become sad because of things they've done, choices they've made, and they don't know how to fix them." "Do you think she wanted to fix it?" I think she wanted to see if you were okay, and now she knows you are, because I have you." It wasn't a question. "You and my Marina, because you have us." Livia nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. Then she let go of her father's hand and ran to Marina, hugging her legs tightly. "Never turn your back, okay?" she said, her voice muffled against Marina's skirt. "You always face forward." Marina felt the tears welling up before she could hold them back. She bent down and hugged the girl back, squeezing her as if she could absorb her into herself, protect her from all the pain the world would inevitably bring. "Always facing forward," she promised. Always. The following winter brought the question that Livia had planted months before. This time it didn't come from a child, but from Raphael, on a cold night when the snow, rare in that region, covered the garden in white. They were on the balcony, under blankets, with hot chocolate cooling in their hands. Livia was sleeping inside, exhausted from playing in the snow for the first time in her life. "Marry me," he said, without preamble. Marina almost dropped her mug. "What?" "Marry me. Become my wife. Not because we need to or because it's convenient, but because it's what I want. What I want more than anything I have ever wanted in my life." She looked at him, searching for signs of doubt, of hesitation, of anything that would indicate it was an impulse rather than a decision. She found nothing, only certainty, a certainty that frightened and warmed her in equal measure. "I was married before," she said. "It didn't end well." "Me too, and it didn't end well either, but that doesn't mean it can't end differently this time." "I can't give you children." "You gave me everything I needed. You gave me Livia back. You gave me a house that is a home. You gave me reasons to come back from work, reasons to reduce travel, reasons to be present. If we never have another child, that's okay. If one day we want to try adoption, that's okay too. What matters is that it's your choice, our choice, not a demand, not an obligation, a choice." Marina thought about all the choices she hadn't made. Marrying Carlos because it was what was expected, accepting his treatment because she saw no alternative, staying in an empty marriage because she had nowhere else to go, and now, for the first time, someone was asking her to choose, to truly choose, to be with him. "Yes," she said. The word came out small, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of her whole heart. "Yes, I will marry you." Raphael smiled, a smile that transformed his entire face, erasing the lines of worry and weariness, and revealing the boy he had once been. "Yes," he repeated, as if he didn't believe it. "Yes, but on one condition. Anything. Livia has to approve." He laughed, a genuine laugh, free from constraints. "Livia will approve. Livia has been asking for this for months. She'll probably want to know why it took so long." They got married in the spring when the flowers Marina had planted in the garden were in full bloom. It was a small ceremony, just the three of them, the gardener who had become a friend, the cleaning lady who cried more than anyone, and a justice of the peace who performed the service while telling stories about other weddings he had officiated. Livia carried the wedding rings on a velvet cushion that was far too large for her small hands. She was wearing a yellow dress, her favorite color, and had flowers in her hair, which Marina had braided that morning with all the care such a ritual deserved. When the judge asked if anyone had anything to say against the union, Livia raised her hand. "I have something to declare," she said, with the absolute seriousness of someone who had something important to say. The judge, surprised but in good humor, gestured for her to continue. "I declare that she is the best mother in the whole world. And that Dad was very clever to find her at that bus stop." Marina laughed and cried at the same time. Raphael did the same. The judge cleared his throat, visibly moved, and ended the ceremony with the customary words which, at that moment, seemed to contain all the meaning of the universe. They were officially a family. The years that followed were imperfect, as all years are. There were arguments about small things like dishes in the sink and big things like career decisions. There were nights when the silence weighed more than it should have, mornings when waking up next to each other was more routine than celebration. There were adjustments, negotiations, moments when Marina wondered if she had made the right decision, and moments when she was absolutely certain that she had. But there were also joys she never imagined possible. Livia's first day of school, when Marina was more nervous than the child herself. Sunday afternoons baking cakes together with flour scattered across the counter and laughter filling the house. Family trips that created memories for albums that grew ever fuller. The nights when Livia fell asleep between the two of them in the big bed, taking up more space than her small body should be able to accommodate. And there was also something that nobody expected. Marina was 34 years old when she discovered she was pregnant. Doctors had said it was almost impossible. Almost didn't mean completely, and sometimes almost was enough. She told Raphael one autumn evening, with the leaves dancing outside the window and Livia already asleep upstairs. He remained silent for such a long moment that she began to worry. "Are you sure?" he finally asked. "3 tests, and a visit to the doctor." "Yes, I'm sure." "But the doctor said—" "I know what they said. Apparently they were wrong." Raphael sat heavily on the sofa, as if his legs had forgotten how to support him. "A baby," he said. "We're going to have a baby." "We're going to have a baby." He looked at her, and there were so many things in his eyes, fear, joy, disbelief, love, that Marina felt dizzy just trying to process them. "Are you happy?" he asked. She thought about the question. She thought about all the years she had spent feeling incomplete, flawed, less than she should be. She thought about Carlos's cruelty, the pitying glances of the neighbors, the silent pain of each menstruation that arrived as a confirmation of her failure. And she thought about how none of that mattered anymore. "I was happy before," she said. "With you. With Livia. I didn't need this to be happy. But yes, I am happy." Livia received the news with a mixture of excitement and concern that was lovely to watch. "But where will the baby sleep?" was his first practical question. "We can prepare a room," Marina explained. "What if he cries a lot? Babies cry a lot. Lucas's mother's always complaining that his brother cries too much." "He'll probably cry. Yes, babies do that." "And you're going to like me less?" There it was. The question Marina knew would come sooner or later. The fear every child felt when a sibling was announced, especially a child who had already been left behind once. Marina crouched down until she was at Livia's height. "Listen carefully to what I'm going to say," she began, holding the girl's hands. "Love isn't a cake that needs to be divided. When more people come along, the love doesn't diminish. It grows. I'm going to love the baby, and I'm going to continue loving you exactly the same way. In fact, I'm going to love you even more because you're going to help me take care of him. I go? You're going. You're going to be the big sister, and that's a very important job." Livia seemed to consider the information. "Is the baby a boy or a girl? We still don't know. I want it to be a girl, so we can play with dolls together." "What if it's a boy?" "Then we'll teach him how to play with dolls too. Boys can play with dolls. Dad said he used to play with them when he was little." Raphael, who was listening from the doorway, interjected with an embarrassed smile. "I said I played with my cousin's toys. It's not exactly the same thing." "Well, it's the same thing, yes," Livia insisted. "You said you were combing the doll's hair and everything." Marina laughed, imagining 6-year-old Raphael combing plastic hair with the same seriousness with which he now conducted business meetings. The baby was born in June in a hospital in the capital where Marina insisted on going to have access to the best doctors, not because she didn't trust the pregnancy, but because she didn't want to take unnecessary risks. He was a boy, small and red-faced and perfectly healthy, with eyes that promised to be brown like Marina's and a surprising amount of dark hair. "He looks like a wet chick," was Livia's comment when she saw her brother for the first time. "Livia!" Raphael scolded, but he was laughing. "It certainly looks like it," she insisted. "But a very nice wet penis?" They named him Miguel, a name that didn't belong to anyone in the family, that carried no weight of expectations or traditions, a new name for a new life. Marina held her son in her arms that first night, while Raphael slept uncomfortably in a chair beside the bed, and Livia had been taken home by a neighbor with the promise to return early in the morning. She looked at that crumpled little face, at those tiny hands that opened and closed without apparent purpose, at that mouth that searched for her breast, even while sleeping. And she thought about everything that had led up to that moment. The failed marriage, the humiliating expulsion, the bus stop where it could all have ended, but where, in fact, it had all begun. Livia holding his hand, Raphael offering a chance, the sleepless nights, the shared fears, the loves that had grown slowly like plants that needed time and care to bloom. And now, this, a miracle she had given up hope for, proof that life sometimes gives back what it takes away. Not necessarily in the same way, not necessarily when we expect it, but it gives it back. "You were very much wanted," she whispered to the sleeping baby. "Not by me, I had given up waiting, but by the universe, I think. By destiny, or whatever you want to call it. You arrived at the right time, when I was ready to receive you, when I had a family to welcome you." Miguel stirred in his arms, making that newborn-like sound that wasn't crying or speaking, just existence asserting itself. "And you will grow up knowing that you are loved," she continued. "Not because you do something, not because you produce something, not because you fill a void that someone had. Just because you exist, because you are here, because you are ours." Raphael stirred in his chair, waking up to the faint sound of Marina's voice. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice hoarse with sleep. "Everything is perfect," she replied. And for the first time in her life, as she said those words, she truly believed them. Marina's story didn't end there, of course. Stories don't end. They just pause at moments that seem conclusive enough to be called endings. There were more years, more challenges. Miguel grew up and became a boy who couldn't sit still, who loved to run and shout and do the exact opposite of what he was asked. Livia became a teenager and then an adult, with all the complications that each phase brought. There were fights, reconciliations, changes of course, surprises that no one expected. Beatrice appeared a few more times over the years, never staying long, never trying to reclaim what she had abandoned. She and Livia developed a strange relationship, not maternal, not exactly friendly, but something in between. A mutual recognition, an acceptance that some stories could not be rewritten, only accepted as they were. Raphael learned to work less and be more present. Marina learned to accept that she deserved the life she had built, that it wasn't luck, accident, or favor. It was the result of choices she had made, risks she had taken, and love she had given even when she had no guarantee of receiving it back. And on Sunday nights, when the children were already in bed and the house was quiet, Marina would sometimes sit on the porch and look at the stars. She would think about the woman she had been, insecure, diminished, convinced that her worth depended on what her body could or could not produce. And she would think about the woman she had become. Mother of 2 children, wife of a man who truly saw her, owner of a house that was home, of a life that was entirely her own. The transformation hadn't been easy, it hadn't been quick, it hadn't been guaranteed, but it had happened. One step at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time. And if someone asked her what the secret was, she would probably say there was no secret. Just the decision not to give up, to keep putting one foot in front of the other even when the path was dark and uncertain, to accept the outstretched hand when it was offered sincerely, to believe, against all evidence, that good things could still happen to people who had been convinced that they didn't deserve good things. This was Marina's story, or at least a piece of it. The piece that began at a dusty bus stop and that, for now, rested on a balcony overlooking a garden full of flowers that she herself had planted. The rest, the chapters that hadn't yet been written, would have to wait for another day. But this part, at least, had a name that resembled a happy ending.